Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. I'm honored by being invited to this great conference, and I'm grateful to my very, very sincere friend, Professor Belkhadir, for this honor and pleasure. Now, the subject I'm going to talk about is about the education. And everybody knows that education is a very basic principle in diabetes management. And therefore, always we are looking for ways of improving the education methods, whether the education is given to patients, to educate patients, or to educate the healthcare personnel. And in spite of the great improvement in developing methods of providing knowledge through new technologies by the internet and telecommunications, we discovered that still the best way to develop better and more higher standard education is through the course of the so-called educating the educators, in order to give more skillful and professional level of efficiency of the educators to provide their education. So now we know, doesn't oh, sorry. So now a professional educator, the job of the professional educator nowadays, we know that she is supposed to encourage the learner to learn rather than providing the knowledge directly. And for this reason, a professional educator, an expert educator, knows very well that when he plans his education program, he has to make his own objectives, decide the strategies or the methods of teaching, and then a process of evaluation. And each of these three points are working together in order to feed each one to the other side. So let's start by pinpointing certain points in each one of these three aspects. And please, I would like to tell you that what I'm going to present to you in 15 minutes is what I used to do through 3 days in a touring workshop in different countries of the MENA region during the past 15 years, conducting workshops to develop education expertise among the educators who are doing the job in each country. So I'm going to just spotlight certain points in each of the three aspects of the education process. Let's start by the objectives. For the objectives, the educational objective must be job and task oriented, which means that if you educate a physician or a nurse, you should educate according, you should put your objectives according what you expect he or she is going to do during performing his job, and what are the different tasks to perform during this job. For example, in each task, the educator should provide knowledge, skills, and develop a special attitude into the learners. As an example, if you want to educate an educator for foot care, for example, podologist, you must decide that he should learn something about how to examine, how to diagnose, and how to manage, and lastly, how to educate the patients on these aspects. And in each of these, something wrong? In each of these aspects, he has to provide certain knowledge, certain skills, and certain attitudes to achieve or to transmit to the learner. Remember again in the objectives that when you decide objectives your objectives, you have to go to the background, to learn about the background of the people who are going to be educated. If they are patients, then you have to know at first their background, and you educate them for what and to what standard. Even if you are going to educate a nurse, for example, you have to decide her background knowledge, what you want her to achieve, and at what level of skill she is going to do her job. For example, a nurse may be just doing foot dressing for infections of the foot, up to a higher standard of doing debridement of the wound, which is done in some countries by nurses. Now let us pinpoint certain aspects in the strategy or the methods of teaching. Still, the simplest way of providing information knowledge is the standard lecture. But to give a lecture needs to have a high skill of being a lecturer. You can be a very great scientist and a very lousy lecturer. So preparing a lecture you must consider that a standard lecture, although it's still the cheapest way of conducting information, it's not a very good method. To do a good lecture, you have to prepare it very well, to prepare a very good introduction to the lecture, to define the important contents of the lecture, not to say more or to say less. Keep during your lecturing your ability to keep active participation of your audience rather than being negative. Keep capturing their attention. Avoid certain things like mannerism and disconcern of the negative attitude of your listeners. Avoid certain other things. And finally, you have to end your lecture by sound conclusions or summary so that the final lecture gives its objective. Instead of the standard lecture, we better give education through the so-called small group education. Again, to conduct education through small group education, the educator should consider the size of the group, which is about 15 or not more than 20 persons, and he should be aware about the role of the learners to be active recipients, and he should be aware of the group dynamics, the so-called group dynamics, which means that some of the attendants in the small group sometimes play the role of positive individuals, allowing improvement of the process of education, and others play negative role. And the educator should be skillful in conducting the process in order to get better results. Finally, or not actually not finally, but one of the most important ways of conducting information is the one-to-one, which means that I'm physician with my patients, the so-called one-to-one education. This is the most important method of conducting information to our patients. And there are certain principles you should be aware of. You should be a very good listener. You should be a good motivator of your patient, and you should individualize and tailor the information you are going to give to your patients, and not to say too much, and be rewarding all the time so that you can keep the confidence between you and your patient. On the other hand, instead of one-to-one, let's talk about educating through mass education. When you go to the television to speak to millions of people all over the country, please don't do that in the way to provide propaganda for yourself, propaganda for certain drugs, propaganda for anything. Don't cause panics. Don't do things, and please avoid that this method of education be for individuals. It's rather for the preventive aspects and for public awareness about, say, lifestyle modification, etc. Then all these methods are ways of providing information. To provide or to teach skills, which is not information. Skills are things you do by your hand. So patients need to learn skills. And the professional educator knows that teaching skills must pass through 3 steps. The first step is describing the skill you want to teach your patient to do. Then making a demonstration in front of the patient, and there are certain rules that you should follow in doing this demonstration. And finally, doing exercising, repeating the process every time. And there are also certain rules, principles that you should be very careful during your exercise. I'm sorry, I'm going into details because I'm just compacting the 3 days workshop into 15 minutes presentation. So let us go to the third aspect of the triad, which is evaluation. Evaluation means that you examine your learners or your students in order to be sure that they have learned the information, learned the skills, and got the proper attitudes. The easiest way is to ask the examiner or a judge to define whether the learner has achieved the objectives or not. But this is rather not the best way, because it's a very subjective way. An examiner may be able to say pass or not pass and give a score without being asked why he decided this judgment. But this is very subjective. In order to be objective, which means that all examiners would give the same score, objectivity is essential in order that the process of evaluation be correct. It's not only objectivity, but validity. So let me explain in 1 minute. Objectivity means that all the judges would give you the same score. Then this is objective, does not depend on the subject, which is the judge. Validity means that you use the method of evaluation in the proper way. You cannot ask by oral examination and decide that the learner has developed the skills to do a particular skill. This is a wrong tool of deciding the achievements. So the methods of evaluation, I have to run through them. They are the long essay questions, which is a very lousy way of evaluation because it examines only part of a very small part of the curriculum. And instead of that, we go to the short essay questions, which are multiple questions, many questions with short answer. This is much better as regards objectivity. But the more objective methods are, as you all know now, the modern multiple choice questions in their different forms. But still, all these are methods of examining the achievements of knowledge rather than skills. Sometimes we put the so-called problem-solving questions using the multiple choice questions in the process. But oral examinations, instead of the written examinations, again, are a lousy way of deciding whether the process of education is achieved or not. So oral examination in general is better avoided as much as possible. Checklists, this is a checklist. Checklist is a very useful and practical way of examining for development of skills. Much better also is the so-called rating scales. Instead of yes or no, just different scales from 0 to 5. These all are subjective, objective ways of examining for skills. There are also so-called continuous evaluation during the course of training a group of trainees. And I better finish by the next one. This is an example of a training course where different trainees, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 trainees are trained to develop different tasks, practical things. And if the evaluator, if the examiner decides, for example, that number 6 has not achieved bad achievement, X means bad achievement. Bad achievements in all the ABCs, it means that this trainee is a lousy trainee, he didn't learn. This is his fault. But if in the evaluation of the process, you discover that the task B is not well done by all the trainees, it means a feedback that the trainer of this particular skill was a lousy trainer. And then you do this as a feedback in order to improve your. I hope I have just put some certain points which impresses you that professional education is not a hobby. It's a science which, if you are not talented to be an educator, you have to learn, study it well, improve your expertise in being an expert educator. Thank you very much.